the psychology of people who feel safer online than in real life. You can text someone a paragraph you'd never say out loud. You can post something vulnerable at 1 a.m. that you'd choke on face to face. You can be funny online, like genuinely funny, and then stand in a real conversation and suddenly forget how words work. And the weird part, you're not shy. You're not awkward. You're actually a pretty deep, interesting person. But something about being seen in real time just changes everything. If that hit a little too close, stay with me, because what's happening inside you is not a social glitch. It's a specific psychological pattern, and once you understand it, it stops feeling like a flaw and starts feeling like something you can actually work with. Picture this. You're in a group chat. Someone says something wrong, and you craft a perfect response. Witty, sharp, just the right amount of extra. Everyone reacts. It lands. You feel like yourself. Now put you in that same room, same people, same conversation. And suddenly you're nodding, smiling, contributing about 30% of what your brain is actually generating, and walking home thinking of 5 better things you could have said. Sound familiar? You're not alone. And you're definitely not weird. There is an entire psychological architecture behind why certain people, smart, self-aware, emotionally complex people, feel more like themselves behind a screen than across a table. And it starts with something most people have never even heard of. It's called the Online Disinhibition Effect, first documented by psychologist John Suler in 2004. And it basically explains why people say, share, and become things online that they can't access in person. Here's the mechanism. In face-to-face interaction, your brain is running approximately 1,000 parallel processes at once. You're reading facial expressions, monitoring your own body language, tracking tone, calculating social risk, watching for signs of judgment, managing your presentation. Online, most of that shuts off. There's no face to read, no real-time reaction to brace for, no one watching you think. And in that cognitive quiet, that space where the social threat system powers down, the real you tends to surface. Not a fake you, not an edited you, the you that exists when the performance pressure drops. Here's where it gets interesting. We've been told that real life is the authentic one, that what you do online is the performance, and who you are in person is the truth. But what if that's completely backwards? What if, for some people, the in-person version is the performance, the managed, monitored, carefully filtered version, and the online version is actually closer to the unedited self? That flips everything we think we know about authenticity. And it's not a small philosophical point. It has real psychological weight. Because if the version of you that feels most like you is the one that shows up when social surveillance drops, then the question isn't, why are you hiding online? The question is, what are you protecting yourself from in real life? This is where we need to talk about self-monitoring theory. Developed by psychologist Mark Snyder in the 1970s, it identifies 2 types of people: high self-monitors and low self-monitors. High self-monitors are constantly reading the room. They adjust their behavior, tone, and presentation based on social cues. They're socially fluent, sometimes even chameleon-like. But underneath all that adaptation, they often feel like no one's ever met them. Just the version they performed. Low self-monitors don't adjust as much. What you see is what you get. They can come across as blunt, intense, or a lot, but they tend to have a very stable internal sense of identity. People who feel safer online are almost always high self-monitors who are exhausted by their own system. They've been reading rooms and adjusting and performing so long that real-life interaction feels like a tax. Online, they can turn the algorithm off. They can just say the thing. But this is the part nobody talks about. If you're someone who has your best conversations in text, who processes better in writing, who forms deeper connections through DMs than dinner tables, you've probably been made to feel like that's a problem. Someone's told you to put the phone down, to be present, to stop hiding behind a screen. And I want to gently challenge that framing on your behalf. Because for a lot of people, online communication isn't avoidance, it's access. It's the only space where the speed of your processing, the depth of your thinking, and the honesty of your feeling can actually keep up with each other. In real-time conversation, your brain is too busy managing optics, Online, you get to think before you speak, which for certain psychological types isn't a crutch, it's just how you're wired. You're not hiding, you're operating in the environment that actually fits your processing style. And that deserves to be understood, not pathologized. And this changes everything. A study from the Journal of Computer Mediated Communication found that people who self disclosed more online than in person consistently reported feeling better understood by their online connections, even when those connections were strangers, not just perceived as understood, actually understood, as validated by follow up relationship quality measures. But here's the part that gets really interesting. The same study found that these online disclosed relationships, over time, at equal or greater depth than in person friendships when they eventually moved offline. The researchers called it the hyper-personal effect. Online communication, stripped of visual noise, actually allows for faster and deeper self disclosure. You skip the small talk faster, you get to the real stuff quicker, because there's no performance layer slowing the intimacy down. So the idea that online connection is somehow less real, less deep, less valid, the data doesn't support it. For certain people, it's actually the faster route to genuine connection. Now let's go somewhere underneath the science for a second. Because for a lot of people who feel safer online, there's a specific emotional history at the root of it, and it's usually not dramatic. It's quiet, it's cumulative. It's years of saying something honest and watching someone's face change. Years of being too much, or too sensitive, or too intense in person. Years of misreading a room and paying for it socially. Years of saying something vulnerable face to face and watching it land wrong. Not because the words were wrong, but because real time vulnerability has no edit button. Online, you can draft, you can delete, you can think about how something will land before it lands. And for someone who has been hurt by the uncontrolled version of that, by blurting out the real feeling in real time and watching it get used against them, that control isn't avoidance, it's self protection, and it makes complete sense. Here's where it gets interesting again, though. Here's the belief most people carry about this: I feel safer online because I can't handle real life. And I want to reframe that completely. The more accurate version is this: you feel safer online because you have correctly identified that unstructured, real time, high surveillance social environments are not optimized for people like you. Not because you are broken, but because those environments are genuinely harder to navigate when you're high in emotional sensitivity, self-monitoring, and depth of processing. Think about it this way. An introvert at a concert isn't bad at music. They're just in a format that doesn't suit how they receive it. Someone who prefers a deep one-on-one conversation over a networking event isn't socially broken. The event is just the wrong format. Online communication is a format, and for a specific kind of human, perceptive, introspective, thoughtful, fast processing but slow performing, it's just a better format, one where the environment matches the person instead of the person constantly contorting to match the environment. The goal isn't to force yourself to love the formats that drain you. The goal is to understand why they drain you and make intentional choices about when you spend that energy and when you preserve it. So here's where we land. If you spent years thinking you were somehow defective for feeling more yourself on a screen than in a room, you weren't diagnosing a disorder. You were noticing a real pattern in a real brain with a real psychological explanation. You are likely someone who processes deeply, feels acutely, and performs constantly. And the online world, for all its problems, for all its noise, gives you something real-life environments rarely do: a moment before the moment, a breath, a chance to be understood before you're evaluated. That's not a small thing. For some people, it's the difference between connection and isolation, between being known and being misread. Keep using the tools that work for you. Keep building the environments where the real you can show up. And when you do choose to show up in person, and you will, and you do, know that the version of you that arrives is not your lesser self. It's just your braver one, the one that decided the risk was worth it. Now, if this resonated, there's something underneath it worth exploring next. Because people who feel safer online almost always share one more trait. They tend to overthink social interactions long after they're over, replaying conversations, editing things they already said, running worst-case scenarios for situations that haven't even happened yet. And that's not anxiety in the clinical sense. That's a very specific cognitive style, and there's a name for it, a psychological framework for it, and more importantly, a way through it. That's the next video. And if you've made it this far, you already know it's going to make a lot of things click. It's right there. Go watch it.